Welcome back. In our last session, we talked through how consumer decision-making processes are impacted by various psychological factors. Today, we're going to take an even deeper look at some of the core heuristics and biases that shape how people make choices and how we can strategically leverage these insights in our marketing efforts. At their core, heuristics are mental shortcuts that people use to make judgments and decisions quickly and efficiently. They're rules of thumb that help us navigate the complex world around us without having to undertake an exhaustive analytical process every time we make a decision. And behavioral biases are the systematic errors or distortions in judgment that result from relying on these heuristics. Even though they often lead to suboptimal decisions, these mental shortcuts are incredibly useful in our day-to-day lives. As marketers, understanding heuristics and biases is crucial because they have a profound impact on how consumers perceive and respond to our products, services, and messaging. Let's start by looking at some of the most common heuristics and biases that influence consumer behavior. So, one of the most well-known is the availability heuristic. This refers to our tendency to judge the likelihood or frequency of an event based on how easily it comes to mind. If we can easily recall or imagine an example, we assume it must be more common or probable. This helps explain why people tend to overestimate the risk of dramatic, high-profile events like plane crashes, even though statistically they're incredibly rare. The vivid mental images make them feel more available. A prime example of leveraging the availability heuristic is the Will It Blend marketing campaign from Blend Tech. So they showed their blender and it was like dramatically destroying objects like iPhones and golf balls. Blend Tech made their product's power extremely salient and memorable for consumers. Another key heuristic is representativeness. It's a lot of syllables. This is the mental shortcut where we judge things based on how well they fit our preconceived notions or stereotypes. So if something seems representative of a certain category, we're more likely to assume it shares other characteristic traits. Shortcut. For example, we might assume that a person in a suit and tie is intelligent and successful, even if we don't have any other information about them. The representation of a professional triggers our mental associations. Gillette tapped into this with their The Best a Man Can Get campaign, which depicted an idealized stereotypical image of masculinity that many men aspire to. So they aligned their brand with this representation, and in doing so, they were able to position their razors as the quintessential man's grooming product. And then there's the anchoring heuristic, where we rely heavily on the first piece of information we encounter when making decisions. This is interesting. So the initial anchor then serves as a reference point, skewing our judgments and valuations even if the anchor is completely arbitrary. A classic example is when car salespeople start negotiating at an exorbitantly high price, knowing that the customer will use that as the baseline to work down from, rather than objectively evaluating the car's true worth. Apple has expertly utilized anchoring in their product launches, consistently setting very, very high base prices for their latest iPhones and Macs. This makes subsequent discounts and mid-tier models feel like a bargain in comparison, even if the prices are still really high. These heuristics and others like them have a huge impact on how consumers perceive and evaluate the options in front of them. And one of the key ways this manifests is through the power of framing and context. Our choices are heavily influenced by the way information is presented to us, not just the inherent attributes of the options themselves. This is a core tenet of the prospect theory, which shows how people's willingness to take risks is heavily dependent on whether a decision is framed in terms of gains or losses. So we tend to be much more averse to potential losses than we are eager for equivalent gains. The way choices are architected and the context in which they're presented also has a big impact. For example, research has shown that people are more likely to choose a healthier snack when it's displayed at eye level in a cafeteria rather than buried on a bottom shelf. Procter & Gamble leveraged this with their Tide Pods launch, which we talked about earlier, framing the new product as a replacement that would make your old detergent obsolete. So this played on loss aversion, making consumers more motivated to switch to avoid feeling like they were missing out. So, how can we as marketers apply these insights about heuristics and biases to create more persuasive messaging and offers? One powerful strategy is strategic framing, carefully shaping the way we present information to trigger particular heuristic responses. For instance, we can leverage the availability heuristic by prominently featuring customer testimonials and success stories, making them more salient and memorable. Or we can use the representativeness heuristic by aligning our brand imagery and messaging with positive stereotypes and ideals that resonate with our target audiences. Anchoring is another tactic we can employ, like setting a high list price that makes our actual offer seem like a better deal in comparison. And principles of choice architecture, like strategic placement, defaults, and reducing friction, can all be powerful ways to subtly nudge consumers towards the outcomes we want. Of course, we've talked about it twice now, I'm going to talk about it again. The ethical considerations matter. We have to be very careful not to cross the line into manipulation or deception that undermines consumer autonomy. Ultimately, we're simply presenting things in a meaningful way that is steeped in a really well-developed understanding of human behavior. Transparency, consent, and respect for the consumer should always be top priorities. Using these insights in a way that genuinely benefits the customer rather than just serving our own interests is crucial. Some best practices include providing clear, accurate information, avoiding misleading framing, respecting preferences, and giving people the freedom to make their own choices. When applied responsibly, heuristics and biases can be incredibly powerful tools for creating more engaging, persuasive, and effective marketing, but we have to wield that power with great care and wisdom.